Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Art of Average, the show where we take a look at games that weren't incredible enough to become a masterpiece, but not bad enough to become a cautionary tale. Perfectly good games that had some great ideas and some maybe really well executed mechanics, but just didn't leave a lasting impression to be remembered. Today's game, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. So one question you might be asking yourself is, what exactly is Dark Messiah of Might and Magic? So it is a first-person action game that released on October 24th of 2006. And it's using the Source engine, which you may be more familiar with a small little indie game, not many people heard of it, Half-Life 2, which came out in 2004. And the physics engine used with Source still to this day remains surprisingly impressive.
Kick him over the edge. Be efficient, sir.
In 2004, it was mind-blowing, and 2 years later, in 2006, when Dark Messiah of Might and Magic came out, it was still impressive, and the game has a big focus on that physics engine. The game is first-person melee combat, primarily, but using things like rope arrows, regular arrows, magic with telekinesis, kicking enemies, and having the physics of objects in the world and the enemies themselves all interacting with each other is a big part of what makes Dark Messiah of Might and Magic so fun.
Who knows what they want? Not me. And frankly, I don't want to know. Very wise.
So what did the game really excel at? Well, I think with this game being a combat-heavy game, we'll start there. The way combat works is that you have multiple different weapons, which includes a sword and shield, a staff, the melee variety that you can hit people with, not a magic staff, unfortunately, daggers, a bow and arrow, and magic spells. And that sounds a little limiting at first, and I will say that, yeah, the variety of different weapons in the game is not too high, but they all do perform a different function, and they're all really fun to use on their own. And really, you can build your character to focus on one of these different types of weapons. The way combat works in action is that you will single click to perform a swing with your sword or daggers, and then you can press and hold to charge up a heavy attack. Sometimes during combat, your adrenaline will shoot up and you'll be able to perform an execution move which slows down time, and it'll lop off the head of an enemy or perform some kind of animation like you're playing Doom 2016 getting a glory kill. It's pretty cool.
We've got trouble.
Bow and arrows perform as you would expect. You have to collect arrows from enemies, and you press and hold to aim your arrow, and in the beginning you're going to have terrible accuracy. So leveling up your archery and accuracy is going to make that much more improved, and you'll be able to take those headshots without issue. Magic is where the game gets pretty interesting, because as this game focused so much on its physics engine, a lot of the spells are focused around doing something that's going to cause some sort of physics reaction. One of the first spells that you'll get is a telekinesis spell, which allows you to grab a small object in the environment and then throw it at an enemy. You'll unlock certain spells that will set something like a fire trap on the ground. So you can sneak around, set a trap, and then lure an enemy into it. They light up, and so too does the environment in an explosion that sends them flying and ragdolling all around. Really, really satisfying. So all this sounds really great, but what stops the game from reaching its full potential? One of the biggest things, in my opinion, is that if you're not engaging with the sandbox and playing around with the physics in the game during combat, you're not going to be getting the full potential. The actual combat itself, if you ignore the sandbox elements, isn't deep enough or satisfying enough to stand on its own. With no advanced combat techniques like combos or parries or sidestepping during combat, it ends up being pretty repetitive pretty quickly. And the way that enemies' health works is that as you perform just regular attacks against them, you'll find that they are the equivalent of a bullet sponge, where they will take a lot of damage before going down because the game is really encouraging you to engage with the sandbox. And while the build variety for your character is pretty diverse between archery, stealth, magic, or combat, there isn't a whole lot of encouragement to spread your skill points across these different paths. The biggest thing contributing to this is that the skills you unlock, for example, Fire Arrow, do not upgrade as your character levels up. So Fire Arrow always does a set amount of damage, but as the game goes on, enemies will get more difficult to take down, meaning that you'll have to invest in skills that are getting you magic spells that do more damage. And those higher level skills that do more damage also require a greater number of skill points invested into them. So Fire Arrow costs 1 skill point, but then in order to get the next skill to do more damage with another spell could cost 3 or 6 skill points. And if you've invested those skill points into the beginning skills of another tree, that's less points that you can put into the advanced spells to do more damage later in the game. And because there isn't enough skill points in the game to unlock all skills across the trees through one play session, and it is not an open world game where you can go and level up and grind out an area, you can find yourself in a situation where your character has a variety of skills, which is great, but they're not powerful enough in a particular thing to easily take down certain enemies. So you can find yourself in a spot where you're struggling a little bit more than you would have if you specialized. But I do want to be clear that the game does not become unbeatable with this system. In my original playthrough of this game back a few years ago, this is exactly what I did, where I had my character's skill points diversified out a bit more than I maybe should have, which meant that I was struggling a little bit in some areas, but I was still able to complete the game without issue. So the game doesn't lock you out in any way, but it does speak to a little bit of a design problem where maybe it would have made more sense to choose a path for your skills to go into up front, and then you would level up that tree so that you were always progressing and getting more powerful in a way that would benefit you later in the game, or to have some kind of respec option that you could use.
So you're Sereth. Good to see you, lad.
And the other aspect of the game that I think really contributed to it not staying very relevant for too long was that it doesn't have a story, unfortunately, that really sticks with you. It's told in a pretty good way. The cutscenes are not bad. They're well voiced, but they're also at a very low resolution. And I'll play some of the clips here so that you can see, but the game in gameplay actually looks really good still. And then you get to the cutscenes, and they're a much lower resolution, and that really hurts it. It makes it feel much older than the game really does otherwise. And while the story itself does have some twists and turns in there which are appreciated, when you're actually in the game, and you'll find that the story fades into the background when you're actually there playing. So the story is really only bookending a chapter or a level. And none of the characters have any kind of arc. So every character remains very flat throughout. And overall, not a very engaging story to begin with. And you find yourself not really thinking about it as you're playing through. The other aspect where the game struggles is just in its general jankiness. You might have seen this from just watching the video, but the way your character moves is a little bit hard to control sometimes. The way the camera tilts left and right, which can be mitigated from the settings menu. Just the way you control your character is a little bit floaty. Your character has a sense of momentum to them, and when you're aiming the camera around, you're not so much turning your character as you are turning the character's head, and then the body follows later, which means you get these weird instances where you're trying to look at something and then instead you're kind of looking at your arm or your weapon, and you have to kind of over correct your vision so that you can then look ahead and see what you want to actually look at. It was definitely done for the sake of immersion, and in some instances I do like it, but in other instances it does make it a little bit almost, I get a little bit of motion sickness sometimes. Not too bad, but I normally don't suffer from motion sickness, but I have found with this game, there are times where I need to maybe pause or just, hit a save point and say, okay, I'm going to just step away for a little bit. And that's not something you want your players to feel. And that certainly won't affect everybody. But it is something that I've noticed with this game. Just moving the character and the camera is just a little janky, and some of the animations, when he brings up the sword or the daggers and he spins them around, it's a good animation, but it's at a frame rate that's kind of choppy and weird. And I would almost say that like everything surface level on the game looks great, but then you start playing it and seeing it in motion, and you start to catch these like things that are just could have used a little bit more polish. So now that we've looked at the things that I think are great about the game and things that are some problems, what is it about the game that overall is worth talking about? I feel like Dark Messiah of Might and Magic really captures what an average game is. It's a game that's so close to having incredible potential, and it just doesn't quite reach it for one reason or another. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic has really, really fun sandbox and combat mechanics to engage with, but it doesn't hold and maintain that throughout the course of the game. It is a story that it tries to have be really epic, but it doesn't keep it front and center, and it doesn't have characters that are interesting enough to care about through the whole course of the game. The game still looks great, but it has some general jankiness. Low resolution cutscenes and some animations that kind of clip and don't look quite right as you're playing. But overall, it's just a really, really fun game, and having the combat be so intrinsically tied with the physics engine remains pretty unique, and I would love to see more games made with this kind of system. So while Dark Messiah of Might and Magic came out and it had some problems with combat not being super enjoyable unless you were engaging with the sandbox, a story that didn't really hold your attention, and some general jankiness holding it back from greatness, I think there's a lot to love with this game. And if you like what you saw here, go ahead, check it out. It's on Steam, and it is a phenomenally fun game. It has a lot of great mechanics, it's really fun, and can be very funny when you engage with those physics aspects. Alright everybody, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any ideas for a game that you think would be great for the Art of Average, go ahead, leave a comment down below. I would love to get suggestions. And don't forget to like the video if you liked it. If you didn't like it, dislike it. And I will see you all on the next one. Thanks for stopping by.